The immediate question that I know people are going to ask me is how this compares to Sauron versus the Lich King, to which I will immediately answer that I do prefer Sauron versus the Lich King. Something I want to get out of the way because it's a fairly meaningless comparison, as they are just 3D high fantasy episodes, and that's all they have in common. But also because most of this video is going to be highly positive, and I don't need this question hanging over the entire review. That might give away immediately that I really like this episode of Death Battle. This is a fantastic introduction to both series on Death Battle, and most likely the only characters from either we might get, with the possible exception of Alduin, but it seems like he basically has no chance, with Deathwing likely to get put against King Ghidorah for worse or worse. Of course, we start with the analysis. I love these two analyses, though they definitely have their problems. Dark Souls analysis overall is pretty okay. I liked how it flowed in the beginning of it, but a lot of the jokes weren't really landing for me, and there was a lot of what felt like, that's a meme I don't understand. But I couldn't tell you for certain because I don't understand them. Still, it was a good analysis, until Jocelyn showed up, and then it became a great analysis. Instead of a dumb cutaway gag, we got a transition into Jocelyn making some unfunny jokes while giving us a pretty damn good lore dump. I really liked how they went over the lore in a way that feels kind of like a narration that you'd hear in like an audiobook or something. There weren't many gags in it, which I appreciate. It had a more serious and somber tone that really fits with what I know of Dark Souls. While Jocelyn is giving us the juicy lore, Wiz also comes in and gives us some feats, mostly for speed, while attack potency comes in corner boxes and mentions of the First Flame's power, finishing with a note on the two endings, with a fantastic inclusion to the analysis. Ending on what feels like, to someone who doesn't know better, might be considered the theme of Dark Souls, which I can't be certain for because I haven't played it, but it feels like this wraps the analysis for Dark Souls up in a nice bow. Also, this episode of Death Battle is sponsored by my goat Brandon Yates. Awesome, I agree, check him out. That's more of, you probably, most of you probably know him more than you know me, I imagine though. But what does this mean with all these guys copped their Brandon Yates tracks? Is that meant to mean commed? Is that what it's meant to say? Because when I see copped, meaning to obtain something, the context is like a reward for something, like, which I guess you could say they got a reward, but a reward generally isn't something you buy. You wouldn't buy a chocolate bar and say you got rewarded with a chocolate bar. And like that's the connotation copped has, like he copped, usually it's negative on, like he copped a fine or something. Or it's related to drugs, which maybe isn't the best comparison to make. Awakened Sacrifice is my drug of choice though. That and Home is Where the Hurt is. Actually, you know what? Don't listen to Death Battle. Go check out Brandon's original compositions unrelated to his commissioned work, because they bang hard as hell, and consistently outshine what everyone knows him for, because they feel like works of pure love, passion, and like they truly show the heart of the man behind them. My favorites are Situational Design, Home is Where the Hurt is, and of course the Conspiracy Rap.
Australia isn't real! Is that like a personal attack or something?
Skyrim's analysis then feels very different, and that's a good thing. This time it starts off very openly silly, and Wiz's exasperated but not surprised response to Boomstick's nonsense is strangely one of the funniest moments I've experienced in a Death Battle's analysis in a long time, and that it got a proper chuckle out of me, and I don't know why. But is it really pronounced Alduin? Because that sounds much dumber than Alduin to me. I like how it starts in second person, talking as if you are the Dragonborn themselves, like how Dark Souls analysis ended in second person too, asking what choice you would make. It kind of blends in the idea that these characters in their games are more so conduits for your decisions as the player, as opposed to their own fully fleshed out characters. I also like Wiz and Boomstick having a brief argument over which side of a war in game they're on, both to show their difference in character and also how they play the game, but also managing to get across the idea that you have those choices as the player in the game. I love the mythical and epic feel that Skyrim gets as opposed to Dark Souls, and they even use a versus calc to transition into more of that epic feeling with the Lore of the Sun. The cutaway gag, meanwhile, well, I'm glad the move they decided to have Boomstick belt out at Wiz wasn't Unrelenting Force, but this gag they actually do not only wasn't funny to me, but also, actually, Wiz does have a soul. Boomstick punches it out of him in Sasuke vs. Hiei. This is completely inconsistent with the Death Battle lore, but they got the goodwill back by calcing these cheese wheels, so that's based. Cheese calc, let's go. The cheese calc that stands alone. The ending, though, is awesome. Going through the heroes of past Elder Scrolls games just to end on the note that the one you will know is present, even miles away, just from the sheer magnitude of what they are and what they do, can only be the Dovahkiin. Though Boomstick then butchers their awesome theme song, which is not okay. Hey, imagine how hard a Kratos vs. Dragonborn Brandon Yates track would go with the Skyrim and God of War 3 themes together, like with the chanting, that'd be great. And honestly, there's a part of me that almost considers these analyses even better than the fight itself. These are awesome, with only a few unfunny jokes, memes that I wouldn't get, but fans would, that honestly don't distract me too much, and a cutaway gag that's just kind of there that take away from it. But those aren't really big things to me. I love these analyses, it's amazing work. We don't usually get analyses that really knock it out of the park like Ganondorf vs Dracula or Reverse Flash's analysis, but when we do, it's awesome. But okay, let's not wait any longer to talk about this fight. The immediate thing that I really need to point out is the lighting. This fight looks gorgeous for the engine it's run on, and the atmosphere it's going for. It's obviously not perfect, but when going for this sort of dark cave illuminated by one or two single light sources atmosphere, this is about as good as it can get with Death Battle's budget, and it's nothing to scoff at. It's very impressive, and Dark Souls looks awesome in the animation. I mean, he also has the much cooler generic design of the two, but that might be my Knight's bias speaking to me. Skyrim, meanwhile, this isn't the fault of the animators themselves, but he looks a bit awkward. His neck seems overly long and with really poor posture, and his overall proportions look kind of diminutive and puny. He looks puny. He looks like a little wee lad, and it's really distracting for like the first 4 seconds or so. I really like the setup. I might not get necessarily all it's going for, what with the whole not being too deep into either series thing, but from what I can gather, these are 2 voices that, according to the credits, are called Darkstalker Calf and Kingskeeper Frumpt, 2 names that I'm going to pronounce very confidently for certain, both voiced by Tom Scholz, and sounding almost the exact same. From what I can gather, someone's thrown Skyrim into the quest of extinguishing the first flame, and Skyrim, being a gullible idiot, is totally okay with this. Dark Souls, meanwhile, is just sitting there after getting whooped in a fight against Goku or something. Immediately we get an Unrelenting Force drop, which is an interesting choice, but for reasons I'm going to bring up later. Initial sword clash is fine. It's maybe a little janky and has that character swinging wildly and waiting for the other to finish politely energy that Death Battle can sometimes have with their 3D fights in the modern era, but it's not a huge problem. Get your arm checked out, by the way, Mr. Souls, what's going on there? I personally am not a fan of the funny little haha look at Dark Souls dodge as Skyrim slides around bit, because it just doesn't work for me. Like, I get it, I understand. But also, most of what I've seen at Dark Souls just doesn't look like this, and it's probably more of a Skyrim thing, but it's just sort of awkward to me. Like, I know that's the point. It's meant to look awkward, but it's not awkward in the way I think they intended. For me, of course. Skyrim also looks like a complete tool, which is not great when all of this fight is already a lot more Dark Souls oriented. Also don't like this hammer swing much. I think the anticipation of the animation is too fast and lacks impact, while the swing is conversely too slow and lacks impact. I think Skyrim blocked with magic though, and yet his shield breaks anyway, which is a cool bit to show both Skyrim using some smarts and Dark Souls being too hench for that to matter. Then we get the arrow in the knee, which, you know what, bravo. I expected them to do this, which means it wasn't as big a surprise for me as I think it might have been for some others, but I also wanted them to, instead of making this bit an awful cutaway gag, do it like this. I don't know why Dark Souls sounds like he's turned on by it though, that's a bit weird. Immediately retaliating with the power move of not only a much bigger arrow, but a much bigger bow, however. Awesome. I absolutely love that Skyrim's response too was to just scream at the arrow, stop time, and jump scare Mr. Souls, then stealing his soul and rendering just Dark as he turns him into a magic crystal. Nice. Obviously Dark had to die a few times in this fight, so this is awesome and expected. The magical element clash is perfectly fine, I don't have any strong opinion on it, and Dark getting a ton of hits looks quite stiff, but not enough to really distract me. I think Dark Souls as a series has attacks that are slower and stiffer with certain weapons, I think, don't take my word for it, it's just what I'm going to say to justify letting this scene go. Skyrim then remembers his favourite internet meme and how he learned to scream just to recreate that one video. A dragon appears with a gun that seems to believe that Dark is a girl, and as girls gotta die, he loses his mind and kills him. Would use a sound effect I know I've heard before, it might have been in Dragonborn vs Kiru. Anyway, before the dragon can find a cack to jump into, he gets done in by Dark just blowing his brains out. Wait, no, that sound effect is the same one from Venusaur's death back in Season 2. Irony. I don't know what Skyrim is doing here, but it seems to do something, that's for sure. It sounds like he then promptly tells Dark to fuck off and calls a lightning storm, revealing that this was taking place in a Romanesque Colosseum. We get what's almost undeniably the single most badass part of this entire fight, where Skyrim prepares to wallop Dark with a lightning fist, only for Dark to jump into the air, grab 2 of the lightning bolts that were summoned against him to fight back, only for Skyrim to then lay him out anyway, with the Colosseum taking heavy damage, and what has to be the single best looking shot of the fight coming after. Nothing's happening here, the two are basically just lying on the floor, but this looks stellar. The way this shot is rendered is downright biblical. The heavy dust and the collateral damage, the bits of visible environment implying as to what used to be there but not really showing much, and the lightning coming down through the darkness while the fire burns through the night. That's sick. Seemingly, both of these two also learn how to fight from John Yalcha, explaining not only their methods of politely letting the opponent get in attacks and not trying to interrupt them, but also them getting new weapons through the means of explosion. Dark gets this big ass Moonlight Greatsword that almost perfectly replicates the one render of him that apparently exists, while Skyrim doesn't need to compensate and takes a teeny tiny Dawnbreaker. I could nitpick the previous shot about how the swords weren't present there, but shut up. The following sword clash is amazing. Sure, it has the same choreography issues as before, with the whole, they kinda just let each other get an attack in, block, and then fight back instead of trying to interrupt or anything. But this is when I bring up Fireborn, one of the coolest tracks Death Battle have ever done, featuring the fan choir. And if you listen closely, you might even hear me. But if you do, you're gaslighting yourself. What, you thought Brandon would consider me good enough? Are you remedial? Anyway, the track complements the fight really well, just generally with its epic tone, and the choir giving this very mythological feeling and scale to it. But when it really goes off here is its peak. The clash looks fantastic. Dark uses his Vow of Silence to shut Skyrim up, which is cool, though again, I'll get back to this. I will say though that Skyrim's reaction to being shut up is unintentionally really funny. Everything getting muddled in audio is a great effect, as is the fact that like visually everything goes a bit dim too. And even with this holding him back, Skyrim gets the stabbing on. Dark then yanking himself through the sword that's impaled in him even as he's dying, while Skyrim was trying to yank it out, and it clearly hurts like hell is raw. And then suddenly it reveals he was Liam Swan the whole time as he tells Skyrim to prepare to die. Skyrim then just hawks a loogie into the gaps between Liam's helmet and sends him flying, probably the neatest usage of his screaming in the fight. He then kills Liam again, or I guess Liam sacrifices his body and all that, and this time Liam manages to get the bonfire going and summons the first flame itself, which engulfs Skyrim, and then Skyrim kinda just tells it to rack off. Okay, let's talk about my honestly one kinda major, but not a deal breaker problem with the fight. Let's talk about the Unrelenting Force, or Fus Ro Dah. It has primarily 3 moments in the fight, one at the start and 2 at the end. The first time it's used, Dark Soul is able to block it with no problem. He just is fine and honestly looks really weak. The second time, Dark decides,
"Oh yes, this move is totally worth busting up the Vow of Silence over because it's definitely going to hurt me, as if it wasn't already established to do nothing to me."
But not only that, but Skyrim again politely allows him to do this by taking way longer to charge this up than before, even though I don't think that's how this ability even works. At least, Death Battle didn't mention it can be charged. The third time, Liam has just summoned the first flame, the very thing that is the source of his power, and Skyrim one-shots it. Like, straight up one-shots it with what doesn't sound like or feel like any bigger of Fus Ro Dah than before. In fact, it sounds like the exact same soundbite. So this kind of falls flat to me. It feels inconsistent as to how powerful this attack is, and the episode itself doesn't explain this to my knowledge. I don't recall them bringing up that they could vary in power. It's really weird, and the death, honestly, even with this issue, doesn't hit as hard for me. Even if I put this issue aside, I feel like in concept is great, but the execution leaves a lot to be desired. Liam summoning the flame is cool, but it also doesn't look like it did anything but make it easier for Skyrim to complete his job. He was told to stop the first flame from being extinguished, and I don't think Skyrim had a way to actually take it out until Liam brought it out for him to destroy. Now, if the first flame was, say, treated like, oh, I don't know, the Eye of Thundera, where He-Man was audibly grunting and straining and had to go all out to destroy it, summoning the full power of Grayskull's secrets, which was cool, even with the lack of visual damage to his body as a result of the episode's age, that would be fine. If the first flame was really messing Skyrim up and we hear Skyrim like, "Argh!" like really grunting because it hurts like hell, that would be fine. However, the first flame doesn't look like it does anything at all to Skyrim. He literally just stands there as if it's going to hurt him and then looks like he went, "Oh hey, this is kind of just a bit warm, isn't it?" and then sneezes it into oblivion, Elder Scrolls pun. Which I get what they're going for, but it kind of makes you question why the undead that was chosen had to be one this daft and why the first flame is just so weak. I know that realistically, if you look at it from a power scaling point of view, then yeah, generally the first flame wouldn't do anything to Skyrim, but the whole fight hasn't portrayed him as significantly stronger than Liam. Like, sure, he did take him out a few times, but it was never as a result of raw strength. It was only speed that really felt like he had the advantage in, and abilities as well. And yes, I know that Skyrim collapses after, so clearly it took a toll on him, but that feels more like a result of the overall fight instead of specifically the first flame. I don't know, the ending just kind of fell flat for me. The rest of the fight though? Excellent. It certainly didn't hit me hard enough to gush over every little bit like with Sauron Lich King, because I didn't feel like the cinematography was up to much. There weren't too many shots that made me go wow to that extent, and the sound design was fairly standard. But I think people who will notice that I said that and think that I think lowly of the episode because of that fact don't realize this is just not a fight I think needed those elements. Awesome shots of cinematography, sure, I could have gone with more of them, but it felt like it had enough to pass while focusing on having more arsenal usage over cinematic moments. This definitely wasn't a fight that needed to reach that scale either, you know? It didn't need that feeling of awe, because while these are mythological-esque figures in terms of the way they're portrayed. In-game, not really, and they even bring that up in the conclusion. This fight did, I think, everything it needed to as an episode for Skyrim vs. Dark Souls. Now, of course, it does feel very Dark Souls more than anything else. All 3 characters with voices are from Dark Souls, the environment is Dark Souls, the vibe is Dark Souls, the atmosphere is Dark Souls, the lighting is Dark Souls. Hell, it feels like a Dark Souls boss more than an actual fight. And so Skyrim isn't as big in this fight to me, which I can see being a turn-off. But like, Skyrim did win, so it balances out, I suppose. Skyrim was the one with the bigger impact on the area during the fight, which, when I say out loud, I realize, yeah, that feels like a boss fight, because usually the boss is the one altering the terrain of the battle, not vice versa. But he is the one to bring out a dragon that takes down the wall and the storm that leads to the whole area being destroyed, so it does feel like a two-phase boss, I guess. Which is definitely the point, I think. At least, maybe I'm reading that wrong, but that feels like the point. And if it is, I can appreciate that. It makes sense. Everyone jokes that this fight really is like a Dark Souls boss, where the guy has just keep coming back over and over, and I understand why it was done like that. Also, while I don't think it had as many cinematic moments, it's not devoid of them. What comes to mind immediately is Dark using the Vow of Silence, and what might not look, but certainly feels like a cinematic clash, as the colours and audio of the area change and are dulled until Skyrim stabs his opponent, which causes the effect to slowly fade away enough that by the time he's getting choked out, Skyrim can get a word out. Also, I like that the bonfire itself also gets put out by the scream at the end. It's hard to notice, but it's neat. And the reflection of Skyrim on Dark Souls' helmet, that's raw, while also subtle enough to give you something to notice in a future viewing. One could not feasibly say that anything less than maximum effort was put into this episode. You could really feel the love in the script here. Even the stuff that I don't think came out great honestly feels more like a result of time and budget than actual effort. It looks fantastic, and it feels epic and grandiose. I'll be very impressed if this season manages to top this episode, and I would not even entertain the idea that this was ever going to fall below Wife Beater Extraordinaire versus Raymond of the Sisterhood of Traveling Glass Consumers. Even the ending of the fight feels like it ties in straight into the analysis, with the analysis for Dark Souls ending on a rather dour note about everything going to shit, which kind of happens in the animation, but that not being the point of it all anyway. What happened to get there is what had meaning, and that's how it is with, it feels like, the fight. Everything that led up to that ending is what really had meaning, the cool battle itself, while the ending that's kind of dour is just a bit of add-on that they did to give the episode some flavor. And yeah, the journey in this episode was awesome, and I have nobody saying otherwise. At the same time, Dark Souls didn't immediately get vaporized in the first hit and was actually able to keep up with Skyrim in speed, so this was actually a terrible fight that was dumb and bad. What an episode though. What an episode. Fantastic doesn't even sum it up enough. With two of my favorite analyses in recent memory, probably only matched last season by, I want to say, Magneto versus Tetsuo. A great fight that, while suffering plenty of problems, are heavily outweighed by what it does right, and a track that is simply stunning. Mwah! What an episode. What a second episode. If this was a premiere, this would rank right up there in the same league to me as Dante vs Bayonetta, Yoda vs King Mickey, and He-Man vs Lino. It's just that good. That's honestly where it's most similar to Sauron vs Lich King. If it was just a few episodes to the side, it would make for a fantastic episode of its kind. The conclusion, I should say, was also great, both talking about how in gameplay Skyrim had a huge advantage, but also when taking lore into account and going all in, his advantage gets even bigger. Fantastic, I love it. As for the next time, well, we got this guy, who's not going to be a Jargo or a Luz situation where I give a shit about if I pronounce it wrong. It's Killua, that's how I'm going to say it, or I can just call him Little Zoldyck if you prefer. Against Mikasa from that one particular magical index, but most known for being that one very specific railgun of a scientific nature. We truly live in a world where the most popular and successful series from a not unpopular medium like light novels is considered niche and obscure, don't we? Also, yeah, first light novel representative, let's go. I'm not even going to give the community's baffling response to the episode's announcement at the time of day, because it's not worth it. I don't know Mikasa beyond her name and that she has the most basic bitch design of any protagonist I've ever seen, but also her power is apparently that she is a railgun. And I love railguns. Railguns are awesome. The Tau Empire from 40k, two reasons I love them. One, they're tiny Gundams, and two, they go around with fucking railguns. You see this guy? Broadside battlesuit? Yeah, railgun. Giant railgun. Railguns are sick, you go girl. Too bad Killer was gonna sweep though, for real. Also, I know her name is Misaka, I just wanted to annoy you specifically, so you're welcome, little sister. And that was the review of an episode that I thought was really cool, and as I've said before, a huge fan of high fantasy and dark fantasy, which we finally got represented with Dark Souls, I can't be happier with how this episode came out. I think this is the new baby, well, was the new baby of Liam, and he blew it out of the park. If he happens to be watching this, fantastic job, mate. You did great. Everyone did great, because I think this came out amazingly. I don't know what your next baby of a matchup's gonna be, but you know what? It's going to be fucking awesome as an episode. So, once again, if you guys enjoyed the review, you can tell me down below. You can like this video if you want. That's how that works. And if you don't like this video, well, you can get stuffed, I guess, because YouTube doesn't let you dislike it. So, I mean, I guess you can. I'll know if you want. But what you should instead do if you don't like the review is go comment about it, because that will... And of course, you guys can share your opinion on the episode down below. Any opinion is acceptable in terms of whether you like or dislike the episode. Of course, how you feel it compares to Ant-Man Adam, Sauron Lich King, and Dio card, which I didn't even mention in the review, in the scripted part at least. It's all good. We accept opinions, differing opinions to mine on this channel. And of course, you can go check out Bivoui's review, which will be showing up in the end card and in the description when it's actually out. I don't know when it'll be out. I know when this will be out. Reviews will most likely start coming out a bit later than previously now, because YouTube isn't letting me monetize them. Limited monetization, which means every time, because I know they conform to the guidelines, I've got to go request a manual review and just sit on my butt for like 4 days before they come back and tell me, oh yeah, you're correct. And of course, there's always the chance that they'll say no, and they'll go, no, it actually does not conform to the guidelines. Get stuff, Nem. In which case, it's still coming out late. It's just late, but also the wait wasn't worth it for me. I hope you guys are okay with that. There's really nothing I can do until YouTube pulls a finger out of their ass. But it is what it is. Of course, thank you to my Patreons scrolling by right now. They help me immensely with what's currently going on with YouTube being a bunch of wankers. And of course, if you go to my Patreon, not only will you get Patreon exclusive content whenever I remember to upload there will be commentary tracks on every episode of Not Death Battle that I release from now on. Currently, Peter Portman's One Pun Man's commentary tracks out there, and we might go back to old episodes and do commentaries on them. Who knows? As well as bloopers for certain videos when I eventually get around to making them and putting the bloopers out. But also you get access to my Patreon-only Discord, where you'll be able to make me say dumb stuff like, what's here? So let's see what they got me. I'm not the imposter. On my honor, as a bean, I will expose the sus with my life! The context of this is much funnier than the joke itself. I call this one the Ant-Man. It's not exactly descriptive of what I did. Name's still work in progress, but we're getting there. I don't know what you want me to do with that. Fussroda! Hey Wiz! He should put Brandon Yates in there with a death battle. No, a music battle! Except don't, because their music's very different and they're both awesome. I love both of you guys. Fussroda! Harusuf! Damn! Miguel O'Hara's Spider-Man 2099 really do be double kicked up on a Thursday afternoon. That's right, Boomstick. I'm gonna beat the shit out of a 15-year-old. That's my impersonation of the voice they gave Miguel in Death Battle, not any, actual thing.
It's time to become the Dark Soul!
Well, I guess it's time to become the Elder Scroll and use my Skyrim. The Dragonborn may have been so much faster than the chosen undead that they could never reasonably hit, and so much stronger that they could never reasonably be harmed even if they were hit, but this was an extremely close matchup. That sounded more like, Animation Rewind than Wiz, I realized. Looks like we gotta show these Dark Souls some Elder Scrolls. In their tongue, you are Heinsberg. Doofenshmirtz! You know what, all things considered, this was actually a fairly decent batch of things people gave me this time, so yeah, that could have been worse. So yes, I hope you guys enjoyed that, I hope you guys enjoyed the review, and I really hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Once again, go check out Biffweed's review when it's out, go check out Brandon Yates, especially his original non-commissioned work, because it is phenomenal, and if you want, you could even subscribe to this channel, I suppose. That one's on you if you want to commit. And you can support my Patreon in the description as well if you want. No one's obligated to give me money, of course. Except YouTube, because goddamn it. But hey, That's all from me. Hope you guys have a great day, a great week, a great year. Have a good one, fellas. I'll see you next time.
I gotta come, no girls gotta die. Jump in the car.